I now have all your questions, so I'm going to run through these and see what we can answer for you. So the first question is, what's the most favourite bear you've drawn? So that's quite a tricky one because, as you know, I've drawn loads and loads of bears, but I think this one is going to be my favourite. This is my garden bear, and the reason that's my favourite is because I've recently just got a house and it's got a garden, so I'm so excited to be growing things like the carrots here and collecting the potatoes when they're ready to eat. So I think this is my favourite bear because I think it's me. So my next question here is, what gave you the idea to draw a spirit? Now the spirits, I did have an example. I think they've run away already. So the spirits came to me when we had lockdown, and we had to stay inside for quite long periods of time to make sure everyone was safe. And I kind of got to thinking, who was looking after the world out there? And maybe there's little creatures out there that take little corners of the world and look after that section. So the very first spirit was a forest spirit, and he looked after the woodland. And then we've got the ocean spirit, who looks after the sea and all the creatures there. And it's kind of expanded, and I've got lots and lots of spirits. I still want to draw things like the book spirit, who would look after the libraries. We've got the baking spirit, who would give you lots of good luck and overlook all the kitchen baking and cooking, that kind of thing. So that's kind of where the idea came for drawing the spirits. So the next one is, what age did you start drawing, painting, or just loving art? Now, I think that's probably going to be forever. I was always creative as a child. I remember creating a picture of splashing grannies in a puddle. I think that was cut-out shapes when I was probably, I think that was nursery we did that. But my mum's always very creative and busy doing, so we were always making things, always drawing. So yeah, from a very, very young age. Next question, have you considered choosing something else to draw as a subject? I think you're probably fed up of bears. So I have a book here that shows lots of things I've drawn, and it often depends on what projects I'm doing at the time, what I might need to draw for somebody, that kind of thing. So here you can see I had a go at drawing lots of food, and there's a tasty cake there with lots of Smarties on the bottom. I've drawn, it must have been a month of fruit. We've got lots more fruit, so that was me experimenting, but you can see I was trying different foods. We've got snails and ants here. There's a wee snail and the ants. So it really depends on what I need to draw and what might come to my head. This is another project I did. This is a book written by somebody in Glasgow. So I draw glowworms here, and they ended up singing and dancing, all sorts of things. But that was a book about glowworms. So I probably wouldn't have drawn glowworms if she hadn't asked me to. But it just really depends on what's happening. So yeah, open to drawing most things. Okay, our next question here, we've got, when did you start selling products? So that was when I went into illustration in 2018. I actually did some Christmas cards for my work. I work for a charity as well as my art, and somebody said, oh, these are really good, why don't you make some cards? So I thought, oh, actually maybe I could draw. So I've got an example photo. This is what my market stall would look like. So you can see all my products here with tea towels, there's coasters, mugs, cards, all sorts. So 2018, that was 5 years ago now, that I did my product stall and have done markets since. Now we've got a question here, how long did you teach your class? So that's, gosh, that must have been in 2012. I did my probationary year, and that was a year of teacher training, and then I had a class, a P4 class, and I just did one term because I discovered it wasn't really for me. Teaching is quite hard, but it was a really good fun time with the class, and I have lots of memories from working with them. Were you good at drawing when you were a kid? Yes and no. It always takes practice. I was trying to find a picture of some cats that I did, which had, I think they had 5 legs, which we already know is a bit interesting. Not wrong, but interesting. It could be an alien cat or something. But yes, it's I would say I was fairly good when I was drawing as a kid, but there's always room to develop, and lots of practice will get you even better. What is your favourite piece of art you have made? Oh gosh, now that's a tricky one. Because I've done so many different things, I think they all have different things for, yeah, different reasons for being good, if that makes sense. But the Star Wars fans in the class will appreciate this one. This is one I still have with me, the original. Normally I sell my originals, but this is one I framed, and it's actually on my art wall normally. But this is my Chewbacca bear with the wee porg seagull. So I would say this is probably one of my favourites. Because it's one of my earlier bears, I was still quite loose with the lines, and I need to remember to stay in that style because it worked really nicely and gave him lots of character. So I think that's probably one of my favourites. Another bear, sorry. Now another bear question. How long does it take you to draw a bear? So in the beginning, probably about half an hour. So what I do is, as you'll see from the video, I draw in pencil first and get the right shapes, and then paint it with watercolour, and then add in the ink detail. With Northeast Open Studios, that was the time I was open for people to come and see what I was doing in my house. I did Become a Bear, kind of like the drawing that you did, but Become a Bear, people would fill in a little questionnaire and send me what they would like their bear to have. So I ended up drawing 75 bears, so I got very quick at drawing them, and probably only takes me between 15 and 20 minutes now. Okay, our next question. Why did you go to Gray's School of Art? Well, the honest answer is that because I didn't get into Glasgow School of Art, and that was where I really wanted to go initially. So Gray's School of Art was my second choice, but my parents met here, and we visited Aberdeen lots when I was on holiday, so when I was little. So by the time I got here, it felt like home from home, and it was brilliant. We had our own studio spaces, they were open until 10 o'clock at night, so you could just come in and use your own space, paint and make a mess, and go home again. And the people were lovely, the course is good, it's very experimental, you could try lots of things. So that's how I ended up in Aberdeen. Why do you mostly draw animals? This is another honest answer, because humans are really hard. People are tricky. I find people tricky, but I'm planning to practice more and more. But animals have lots of fur, so you can get away with little mistakes on shapes, and it gives them character, and it's fun to make them a little like people, so adding on glasses, or perhaps giving them a bear to hold themselves, so the bear could be holding a teddy bear, or this kind of thing. So I mostly draw animals because I find I'm more comfortable with them, I think, and they have more space for playing around with, and changing their expression, changing how they look, changing their proportions. So you could make a bear with quite a long neck and it would still look okay, whereas if you gave a person a long neck, it would start to not look like a person. So it's I find that balance tricky, but we're practicing. Okay. So although I find people really hard to draw, I have some examples of what I've managed to get to so far. So this is a little girl I'm designing for the same person who wrote the Glowworms book, and this is done on the iPad. And then that was another wee friend of hers, and another one. So those are a couple of examples of little ones. And then we've got, you might have spotted these from my website, we've got the sailor, or the lighthouse keeper, and he's actually going to be in part of the Water's Edge game. He's now the time tracker lighthouse keeper for the game. So that's a lighthouse keeper. We've got a bagpiper. So I'm practicing. I do find beards are very helpful because chins are really hard to draw, I find. So quite often you'll see that these guys have beards to help cover that. And we've got the long lost cousin, the mailman, the postie of the bagpiper as well. Okay, back to the teaching. What made you start teaching and why? So I've always loved projects. I've always loved learning. I've always loved sharing that with people. So that was why I wanted to go into teaching, especially primary teaching, because you guys get to do all sorts of things across all sorts of subjects. But it was hard. It was hard for me. So I think perhaps I'll come back and do maybe art lessons for people rather than the whole thing. Okay. Why do you like drawing lighthouses, seagulls and bears so much? So well spotted, those are my three favourite things. Probably the lighthouses and seagulls because I grew up on the coast. I grew up in Caithness. Although we didn't have too many lighthouses, we certainly had seagulls living by the coast. And lighthouses just have an exciting adventure about them. They're on the edge of the sea and kind of helping people back, and there's lots of stories I think behind them, so that's the appeal for those. And bears, I think because they're so cuddly, bears can be anyone's friend. And they've got such a nice shape, and they can be kind of just cuddly. So I think that's why I like drawing those three things the most. Now this is a fun one. Marvel, DC, Disney or Star Wars? So I'm going to cheat a little here and say Disney because it's got The Mandalorian. So that'll cover both Disney and Star Wars. I like Disney because it's got lots of music, lots of magic, lots of lovely stories. Yeah, a mix between the two. Hopefully I'm allowed to say that. Oh, now I think I might have already covered this one. When did you draw your first spirit? So that was in COVID, during COVID, so 2020. That was 3 years ago, and we've now got a collection of maybe 13 or 14 spirits. Open to suggestions for new ones. As I said, I'm hoping to draw a baking spirit and a book spirit, maybe a birthday spirit, and eventually I want to make some playing cards so that there'll be a different spirit on every single one. So I'll need to draw 52 spirits. Maybe you can help me in that. Okay, a business question. How much money do you get by selling your products? So this has built up since 2018. And the more people who know about me, they maybe buy gifts to then send to people who will then come and look to see what I've got. So word of mouth, it started to build quite nicely. And now I would say I make as much or more than my day job, which is really exciting because it means I can maybe consider going full-time with my illustration and still keep the house, keep the holidays, stay the same lifestyle, but do it through illustration instead. So thank you everyone for liking my art. Okay, how old were you when you realised art was your passion? I think probably when I was in high school, I was considering where I wanted to go for university and what I wanted to do. So it was a mix between geography and forensic science, actually, a bit like CSI, and art. And art won because I'm here, but illustration has always been an interest, and although I didn't do illustration at Gray's School of Art, when I realised the illustration part was a passion, I think that was probably around about the time that I set up my business in 2018. So I always wanted to draw children's books and illustrate and just bring smiles to people's faces through the drawings. So it changed a little in what type of art I was interested in, but I would say probably from a very young age, to know then in high school that I wanted to go on to do art. Okay, so we've got a water's edge question, and we've got a couple here. So what inspired you to make water's edge? And what made, oh sorry, I can't read that backwards. What made you want to make your own game? So we've got, as you saw, Water's Edge here. This is such an achievement. It's so exciting to hold a game in my hand that I have made. But I'll let you into another secret. This was actually meant to be a children's book. So I got to discussing the idea with my partner, and I really wanted to create a book where people were like in the story, in the book. So because we play a lot of games ourselves, it came up in conversations like, could it be a game? And so we thought about it, discussed it, tried it out with a very scrappy sort of version, and not this finished version at all, and it worked, and it felt like you were in the fishing village, which is what I wanted the story to do. So the book is still in the background, still in development, but that's what made us want to make our own game, and the fact that we play a lot of games. So we thought, oh, I wonder if we could make our own. So we did. There we go. Back to Star Wars. Will you do some more Star Wars bears? Quite possibly. The Star Wars bears were actually done to, because I had a stall, or a market stall, at a Comic-Con in Aberdeen, and I thought I should probably do some film related or film inspired bears, but you have to be very careful with copyright of characters. So although my bears sort of dressed up like Chewbacca. Ugh. I have a chicken called Chewbacca, so I keep calling him Chewbacca. But Chewbacca, my Chewbacca bear, is sort of it's hinted at Star Wars, so it's not a full copy of Chewbacca. It is my own version of it, so that's really important to bear in mind. So I'll need to think, maybe I could do a Mandalorian bear or something like that. So watch this space, we'll see what we can do. And we've got the last question, is how old were you when you drew your first bear? So this goes back to the book, which I have temporarily misplaced. Oh, here we go, behind me. So my partner got me this one, which is Draw Every Day, Draw Every Way. And that was probably in 2017, before I started drawing illustration sort of style pictures. And you might recognise from my website and my logo one of the very first bears, and that's this fellow. Hopefully you can see that with the light. In pencil and pen, that one was. So that would have been 2017, and I was sort of doodling at the time with different styles of bears to see what would work. So the bears probably came quite late. I must have drawn a teddy bear when I was younger, but I can't find any pictures of any, and I don't remember any particularly. The bears have developed, so sometimes they work really well, and sometimes this one's got too big eyes. But I really like the flowers, so I might, and how she's holding the flowers, so that was one of the earlier ones. And then we've got yeah, the kind of softer ones, and then another one that's kind of blowing. So they just practice, and then they've ended up to being what they are. But what is really cool was one of my first bears looked like this, and that was in 2018 when I first got a graphics tablet to try drawing digitally instead of watercolour and ink. And then I tried drawing the same bear 3 years later, and look at the difference. So this is much more like my bears now. But that was one of my first attempts. So you can see how it's developed, and the idea is still the same, but I've practiced and practiced and practiced and got it a little bit better and a bit more movement. So yeah, it develops. It's good fun. And I think that is all the questions we have. So thank you so much for sending those across. It's been great to talk those through with you, and hopefully I've captured or answered everything, maybe with some extra secrets that I shouldn't share. So yes, thank you so much for choosing me as one of your artists, and keep being creative, keep drawing.